apologizing for the late start by 15 minutes. In the world of technology, sometimes we can't avoid technical glitches like this. So I would like to apologize for our starting late. We'll just get into it. Let me start with by introducing myself. I am Rahila Thomas, the Country Director for Energy Markets and Rates Consultants Limited. We are independent consultants providing techno-economic, energy markets, regulatory, transaction advisory, and financing advice for electricity, renewables, and gas-to-power sector clients. We are a member of the EMRC group of companies worldwide. I welcome again to this webinar all our online participants who have taken time out of their busy schedules to join us this morning as we discuss the new legal landscape of the power sector. With me to have this discussion are four distinguished power women who are representing key stakeholders in electricity generation, transmission and distribution, the public and the private sector. So it would be a very, very interesting and insightful discussion. Of course, some people may wonder about a webinar being all women and female in the face of the need to promote diversity. I would like you all to see that the spillover from last month's International Women's Day themed embracing equity. So let me introduce my first panelist, Dolapo Okukoye, who is the managing partner at Detail Solicitors, who we are co-hosting this webinar. She leads the firm's energy infrastructure and power practice and has extensive experience advising clients on a wide range of complex transactions. Her professional experience spans across energy, project development, project finance, infrastructure development and finance, corporate commercial transactions, and mergers and acquisitions. She's one of the leading energy lawyers in Nigeria, having worked for government agencies, regulators, and private parties, institutional investors, and financing institutions. Dolapo combines her strong legal background and industry knowledge to add value to each transaction, and her attention to the intricacies of every brief sets her apart as a pillar of support to clients. Dolapo is also an avid speaker and thought leader, and is passionate about encouraging the advancement of women in professional and business circles and increasing energy access in Nigeria and across Africa by leveraging private finance with the use of viable business and project models. You're welcome, Dolapo. My next panelist is Olajumoke Delano. She is the head of regulatory and government relations at the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. She's a highly skilled, hands-on lawyer with expertise addressing the legal, regulatory, and policy issues affecting large, complex organizations in Africa. She's a multi-jurisdictional lawyer. She is qualified to practice in Nigeria, the United Kingdom, and the state of New York in America. She has over 27 years of experience in various sectors, including legal, banking, energy, and infrastructure. Olajumoke is an expert in legal advisory, energy regulation, infrastructure development, public-private partnerships, projects and transaction structuring, transforming state-owned enterprises, governance, compliance, contracts and documentation within emerging markets. Olajumoke, I welcome you to this session. The third speaker is Fatima Lawan Mukhtar, who is currently the company secretary and legal advisor of the Transmission Company of Nigeria. She has cognate experience in negotiation, sourcing and allocation of funds for large-scale transmission infrastructure assets. She coordinates a team of lawyers and other professionals to provide the legal and financial framework to structure concessionary loans for transmission infrastructure expansion in line with TCN vision and strategic goals. In addition to her role in transmission infrastructure development, she also ensures that transmission assets are operated in line with extant regulatory codes and statutes. She has a proven track record of providing expert legal, regulatory, and compliance advice to executive management and the board on critical investments and infrastructures needed. Thank you, Fatima, for coming. You're welcome. And the last speaker on the panel is Dr. Joy Ogaji. The last speaker on the panel is Dr. Joy Ogaji. She's currently the MD CEO of the Association of Power Generation Companies in Nigeria. She's a well-rounded legal and corporate practice professional with over 20 years of proven and progressive managerial experience in various aspects of commercial corporate law, such as oil and gas, power, energy, transaction, regulatory matters, with a very strong work ethic. She has huge experience with corporate governmental authorities and regulatory agencies. She's a preponderance. She is currently the CEO and Executive Secretary of the association, managing 26 generating companies, and she's interfacing with various stakeholders associated with the power generation companies in Nigeria. Distinguished ladies, I welcome you to this panel, and thank you for, I thank you for coming, and sorry that we had to start this session late due to the technical issues. Let me now discuss give context to the discussion that the panelists will have around the changing legal landscape of Nigeria. I'd like to start off first with the evolution of the Nigerian electricity supply industry. We started in 2005 with the EPSRA, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act that was issued in 2005. With this act issued, a lot has happened since 2005. The act has brought about an independent regulatory commission. It established the Rural Electrification Agency, established the Nigerian Electric Liability Management Company, and so many other institutions, regulatory instruments, code, and orders that have helped to shape the operations in the power sector. We have been undergoing reform since 2001 when the initial national power policy was established. Recently, the Senate Committee on Power took the lead to now put in place an electricity bill that would repeal the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, with the mind that we have come a long way in the reform of the power sector, and there's a need to bring about an electricity act that would be much more encompassing and would consolidate the laws relating to the Nigerian electricity supply industry, provide a comprehensive legal and institutional framework for the power sector in Nigeria in the areas of electricity generation, transmission, system operation, distribution, supply, trading, enforcement of consumer rights and obligations. The electricity bill is also envisioned to provide for a holistic, integrated resource plan policy that recognizes all sources of generation and is able to include the integration of renewable energy to Nigeria's energy mix and attract investment and for related matters. So we have started the reform. We've gone through 19 years of reform, and the Senate Committee on Power that took the leadership in bringing about this electricity bill today is currently trying to seek concurrence with the lower chamber of the National Assembly to pass this bill. Despite the reforms that are started leading up to privatization, which is supposed to be a transformative thing, the Nigerian electricity supply industry today is still plagued by lack of investment, poor infrastructure, and high losses, leading to frequent power outages and limited access to electricity for many Nigerians. Last month, an act to alter certain provisions of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to allow states to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity in areas covered by the national grid and for related matters came into force. This is widely believed to have the potential to transform the electricity industry. Under the previous system, the federal government held a monopoly on the regulation of the entire electricity value chain in Nigeria. This centralized approach has been criticized in many quarters for being a key factor that has led to the slow development of the Nigerian power sector. Therefore, the recent constitutional amendment is a major shift in governance and participation in the electricity sector and has the potential to increase generation capacity and access to electricity, improve reliability, and attract much needed investment in the sector. Given this background, I would like to go straight to the panelists, and I would like to start with Dolapo Kukoyi, who jointly we supported the Senate committee in drafting the Electricity Bill 2022. Dolapo, you're welcome. Given your participation and support to the Senate committee on this electricity bill, would like to hear from you what this electricity bill 2022 would usher in if it is enacted. What are the key highlights of the bill and how these will impact the Nigerian electricity supply industry? You have 5 minutes, please, to provide your contribution. Thank you. Dolapo?
Thank you, Rahila, and great to be here. I hope okay, you can hear me. Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you.
So I'm just going to share slides. Okay, just going to share slides on highlights of the bill, and hope this leads into the discussions. Please, if you can. I'm just going to just to say that highlights of what the bill is. Okay, in the course of our work, just assessing the bill when it was in its initial drafts, what we basically did was kind of like go through a process of a diagnostic, of where the power sector is and a lot of the things that had caused in the past, would I say, and a lot of things that all judicial precedents, given that we are a growing sector, I even anticipate with recent changes that we will still have to our laws, but what we tried to do in our advising in terms of a diagnostic process was kind of bring the law to a place where would hopefully not necessitate too many changes and could set some kind of institutional framework for us to build up on. So with that background, I'm not to walk through all of the slides that I have, but just touch on key things that you hopefully would see when this bill is passed into law. And even with the recent changes with the Constitution, maybe there would even be further changes, from what I must give a caveat that this presentation is based on the last draft of the bill that we've seen. As you know, with legislative action, that is a parallel process, and sometimes practitioners like ourselves don't see what's happening in that process. So you may see something different, but I hope not too widely different. In terms of institutional issues, one of the things that was proposed in the bill is to kind of whittle down the intervening powers of the Minister of Power. And that's to kind of give the regulator NERC on the federal level, autonomy. And in that sense, also make it clear that with certain decisions, rather than saying that the minister would, the minister would be required to hold power consultations, which really already happens. But I think that what we're thinking about is when you make it very clear in the law, then, for that future ministers are likely to follow that. Also, a number of for electricity theft, which is very, very important, very also that will to actually prosecute offenses in corporate courts. I'm just waiting for my slide to change. One of the major issues that I've had since privatization up till now was, our market stages. What stage of the market are we supposed to be in? What are the prerequisites for those stages of the market? And the fact is that obviously things haven't really gone as the law portended, and then NERC used the market rules as a stopgap, to be able to deal with intervening issues that happened not exactly as the law portended. But this also led to a lot of court cases where, participants in the market would say that we are not supposed to be in this stage, but minister has said that we're in this stage, but we are not ready and all of that. So I think what the bill just says here is try to make things clearer and vesting NERC with that responsibility to ensure a phase-wide development of the market from its current transitional stage to the medium stage market, to try to align the provisions of the EPSRA currently today with that of the market rules so that there's some kind of holistic direction. The bill also recognizes electricity as beneficiaries of the competition transition charge, and it also spells out, what MBET's role in the market will be, how long not in terms of years, but gives that it should be phased out by the medium stage. We all already know, that in terms of MBET's role, even though it's not abundantly clear, I'm sure that Joy will have a lot to say in this respect, how it's going to be and how it's going to turn out. We know that MBET has maybe 2-3 years. How that is going to run, we don't know yet, but the bill actually spells out the fact that by the time we get to medium stage, MBET's rules should be phased out. I'm sure the bill delineates, the process of establishing an ISO, and delineates what the ISO will cover. Interesting developments would net and for investment in transmission network by TCNC. And also it's a basis for federal and state governments to enter into PPP arrangements. I think that with the constitutional change now, that's an interesting private dynamic companies network that we hope to see.
Thank you. Thank you, Dolapo, for that position.
Thing that has created on sense of
Dolapo, your connection is really...
Oh, you can't.
Dolapo, your connection
is hear
quite
me.
Bad.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, it's a bit patchy. If you perhaps... Yes, a bit patchy.
Oh, so sorry about...
We couldn't hear. Okay, now it's better.
You have 1 minute without sharing anything.
Yes.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Sorry, Dolapo, for your connection. It's bad, perhaps. You want to switch service provider. It's really, really cracky. Thank you very much for that. Hope that, the 10th assembly will be, the 10th assembly will be the expectation that, they will come in by after the new administration is inaugurated. The expectation is that this electricity bill will be passed, is currently in the House for concurrence with the lower chambers. We hope that when this is done, we sent to the president for assent and hopefully passed for us to have a new act that governs the operations of the power sector. What I would like us to get into now is really the constitutional amendment. The second schedule, part 2, concurrent legislative list of the 1999 Constitution states in section 13 that the National Assembly may make laws for the Federation or any part thereof with respect to electricity and the establishment of electric power stations. On the screen, you have that part of the amendment that took place. I'm sure everyone can see it. I would like to, on the back of this, I would like to ask you, Jumoke, that what this really implies for distribution. What we see here from this provision is that the electricity distribution is solely under the purview of the state, and generation and transmission is that of the federal government. With the amendment, the state will become more active. How do you see this playing out, given that not all states will be concurrently active? I mean, right today we see that some states are way ahead, like Lagos State, of course. Kaduna has things they are doing, Ekiti State, Akwa Ibom. So for discos covering more than one state, how do you see this playing out? For Abuja Disco, for example, you have 4 states. So what are your thoughts on this? How will this play out, given the provision of this constitutional amendment?
So thank you, Rahila. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation, and good morning to my co-panelists. It's my pleasure and privilege, to be at this session. So this is I would say that these are very interesting times for the electricity supply industry in Nigeria, and of course catalyzed by this recent constitutional amendment, that empowers states to enact laws for generation, distribution, and transmission to all areas within the state. So while previously there was a restriction where they were not allowed to transmit and distribute in areas covered by the national grid, now they have free reign of all the areas within their state, to enact, these laws. Now, it's interesting that while this constitutional amendment is taking place, it's not a silver bullet. It's been assented to by the president. But what does a state need to do in order to actualize, the intent of the amendment? So they have to see the right. Will all the states take advantage of it? That remains to be seen. Of course, as you mentioned, some states are already on the forefront of, either amending, existing legislation or even developing new ones that are going through the process of being passed in order to actualize it. So for a state to be able to benefit from this constitutional amendment, they need to create, policies for electricity, for creating an electricity market within that state, considering the peculiarities, the advantages that the state has, the natural endowments, in developing a policy and integrated electricity plan, for the state. Now, from the policy, you now, of course, need to enact a law, because the constitutional amendment will not automatically take effect. So you need to enact a law that provides the framework for the development of the state electricity market. And, different scenarios are possible, where the state is a player, where the state is an enabler for PPP projects, the public-private partnerships, as mentioned by Dolapo, states providing catalytic funding to make projects bankable. So there's a lot that can be done. But, a law needs to be in place, or where they already have a law, like Lagos had the Lagos State reform law, you could amend a law or, create a new one in order to maximize this benefit. Of course, then the agencies, the regulators, that would ensure that this implements the framework that, has been provided and create this electricity market. So I would say that, bearing in mind this amendment, there's no real need to invent the wheel, because the process of electrification takes time, it's quite expensive, So do states want to reinvent the wheel because they now have these powers? I think it's better for them to consider, evaluating what is available and, deciding with the key stakeholders how to build upon the resources that are already available, that already exist within the states. Now, for distribution companies that exist, across states, I mean, there's some distribution companies that cover even 6 states. The ideas have been mooted that they could possibly evolve to having a holding structure where the distribution company is the holding company, but different entities now exist within the different states that will now be subject to the laws, that, emanate from these states by virtue of the powers that have been given to them under the constitutional amendment. So you would have a holding company, distribution company, whilst, you have subsidiaries in the different states. And, this could also provide potential opportunities for investors, to come into these subsidiary companies and invest, or even the state, depending on what the framework, the enabling framework, that has been created. Now, I see that it is important, for stakeholder engagement to continue. Collaboration and stakeholder engagement is key and is required at different levels. Now, as these states start to decide they want to create their laws, it's good to engage with the federal regulator and the existing market participants in order to develop an environment that will indeed attract investments into those states, and not an area where the law is so jumbled up and unclear that investors will be wary of even investing in such states. Now, that's collaboration at the level of enacting the laws. What about with respect to the law that will eventually come out of the National Assembly that Dolapo mentioned? There needs to be stakeholder engagement in that also, in ensuring that it's important that what is envisaged, is realized. And then where does the role of the federal regulator end? Where does the role of the state regulator start? It's important that there is clarity, across any laws at the state level, or the law that eventually emerges from the National Assembly, so that there's clarity and, it minimizes confusion and minimizes conflict and disputes. At the last level, I will also say that it's important that the market participants and the states, the licensees, industry stakeholders must also engage. Like for distribution companies that run across multiple states, they need to engage with the states where they are located in order to agree the way forward, in order to ensure that they do not end up in disputes in the legislation that will just slow down the whole process of electrification and creating energy access. So it's important, for all parties, stakeholders to come on board in order to fashion the way forward and make this a win-win, in terms of energy access, for the communities and for the states that are affected. Thank you, Rahila.
Thank you, Jumoke. I mean, definitely, no doubt, collaboration is key. I like the point you make about having a holding company where you have subsidiaries across the states. In that sense, every state would have an electricity distribution company in their states to actually manage and kind of work together to increase energy access. It's sometimes, as we say, the devil is in the details. So, but definitely what you've said about having those conversations happen is very, very critical to the success of this whole process. And obviously, talking about distribution, transmission is critical. We have today 10 transition regions, and it's still 100% federal government owned. I wonder about this Fatih, who is of the transmission company of Nigeria. Can states make a claim? I'd like to understand. I've had conversations with different representatives of states speaking about wanting to island their states to providing power for their citizens. And even the talk about having, lean on the transmission infrastructure in that area. Given that it is 100% owned, and we know that today not all parts of the transmission grid is fully strengthened. I mean, there's a lot of investment going, projects and all that. I wonder that when states make claim to a region to island themselves, is this even a possibility in your view?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here, Rahila, and for my colleagues as well. It's an interesting time, as Jumoke has said, and everyone is saying it's exciting, it's unclear, it will take a lot of navigation to get to where we want to get to. Thinking about this is that this is the constitutional amendment was only the fact that it extended to even where the national grid. So in other words, that the change was actually, yes, looking at the bill, if you look at the bill, it says that the idea of having investors in transmission, that's well and good. I mean, there's already a regulation in NERC about investing in transmission network. The issue is, how does an investor recoup what he's invested? Are the tariffs cost reflective for him to recoup? I won't invest in something I don't see getting a rate of return. So the tariffs will have to be cost reflective. They will have to also be less interference. As you said, yes, we're totally government owned. The bill also appreciates the fact that the wires business, the transmission business should be hyped up from the dispatch. There's a lot of clamor by the participants that the ISO should be established and that let TC and TSP stand on its own as well, and which is in the bill. Lagos is made out of the states. I've read the bill, the 2021 Lagos bill. They've made a lot of progress in that area, but they've also, what they did actually is the same suggestion Jumoke had. They've actually said, we're not very interested in running the wires business. What we're interested is that you still have TCN, and then the state would have a holding company within TCN. Lagos is very lucky. I mean, 30% of our infrastructure and power goes to them. So in terms of progress, they've really progressed ahead of other states. But if you compare Lagos to the northern states, if you could, unfortunately, I don't have the map, but if you look at it, somewhere like where I'm from, the northeast, is it'd be very difficult for them to take up this. So it depends. States are burdened with they're burdened with their loans already, their obligations. Going into transmission is a very, very cost-intensive thing. And also their right-of-way issues. Even as federal government, we try to collaborate with states. There are a lot of states that we're trying to reconduct, but getting people out of the right-of-way for even state governments that own the land is quite challenging for them. So what I see is, yes, they can do it. How it works is that the regulator, the state regulator and the federal regulator will have to delineate roles and responsibilities. There has to be a clear delineation, if not that. And then in terms of how, the grid is only it's stronger, because it's more resilient if it's bigger. So you will still have to have a national grid. There's a tie line between, say, the Lagos region, if you're joining it to, say, another region. So that tie line, the law says interstate things are on the exclusive link. So you still need that, because even assuming states produce excess power, they will need to export it somewhere. So you still need that federal thing there. If they don't have as much, they will need to import as well. The good thing about the new bill is that it opens up to renewables. So for, like my state, as I said, there's a lot of sunshine there. They could explore that as well and reduce the carbon footprints. It's a possibility, but there's still a lot of work to be done to achieve this. For TCN, I see TCN still having a role. I see the regulator still having the role. But Jumoke, in terms of distribution, another alternative I've also thought is, because I've seen it recently in the papers, the UBA is saying it wants to sell off its shares. What I'm thinking is government should divest their shares in the distribution, and the states could actually take up and buy up those shares. Or as UBA is selling shares now, those states in your franchise areas can actually buy those shares as well, and then you run it. There are a lot of options that are possible. It's just that people just have to sit down and do a lot more work on it. But it's good that the conversation has started.
Yeah, when you talk about the thank you very much. When you talk about the states buying up the shares, Jumoke can speak more to this. You have for the distribution company 60% owned by the private investors and 40% is government, and that 40% I believe is representing the 3 tiers of government. Yes. So are we saying that the federal government reduce their share in a way that you have the states taking more of that? And will the states be able to put capital on the table when it is called for? Jumoke, what are your thoughts on this?
So interesting thoughts, and I like the fact that there are various options. And
yes,
Fatima mentioned the fact that the states they are inundated with debts as we speak now. So does the state really want to? While they may like to, can they afford to? But even if they can't afford to now, there are different structures that allow a state to have the eventual output of better energy access and better electrification. And that can be providing the enabling environment that allows investment to come in, whether the investment is from the state or the investment is from a capable investor. So I think there are different options that are certainly worth considering, which DISCO investors also will be considering at this time. That's what is the best way to go about achieving the end goal of energy access or better electrification. Of course, an investor is always interested in type of return, as Fatima also said. So I think it's open for discussion. Yeah. Do the states want to take up more shares? That's one. But is that the most effective role that the state can play? Or maybe you need them to actually contribute to making projects bankable, providing some form of catalytic fund. So there are different dynamics, to getting a state electricity market up and running. And I think those conversations are ongoing as we speak.
Thank you so much, Jumoke. Thanks, Fatih, for your contributions there. Obviously, with the state participation, being able to legislate and have control over generating, transmitting, and distributing power, what we will eventually start to see is the state issuing licenses to generation to power developers. Now, the increase in generation capacity and the proliferation of generation sources are definitely bound to be the case with this amendment. Dr. Joy Ogaji, I can see you. Thank you for joining us. And sorry that due to the technical hitches, your video can't be on, but would love to hear from you. I was speaking to the generation capacity being increased based on this amendment. While I see that this is a good thing, I would like to understand from your perspective, are there any concerns on your part? Is there a risk that the increased capacity can be stranded? And if yes, how can this be mitigated? Because today we know that the total installed capacity is over 13,000 megawatts, but unfortunately, what is being distributed to customers today is about 4,000 megawatts. So a huge amount of that capacity is stranded. What are your concerns? I mean, do you see concerns with this? And how can these be mitigated at the state level to ensure that generation that comes on is being distributed effectively? Joy, over to you. Dr. Ogaji? Dr. Okaji, are you there? Okay, it seems we are not able to reach Joy, but we can see her, but she's not able to speak. That question obviously has an effect on distribution as well as transmission to Jumoke and Fati. And Dolapo, you're there, please. I would like to also hear from you on this aspect of generation. And after you speak, I would like Fatima and Delano to speak on the effect of this, because this obviously raises the issue of potential misalignment. The way it should work in the power sector, we should understand what the demand is, and it should work upstream. So when we establish the demand, transmission is there to ensure that that demand is met when generation provides for it. So in this situation where you have the states being able to legislate and issue licenses, we will see an increased amount of capacity, which can be on paper, not actually live, but that will happen. So in the event that you have all these power developers going to the states and trying to get licenses to start producing power, what are your thoughts, Dolapo? Let me start with you. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a potential fear that this will be stranded? And if that is a fear, how do you think it can be mitigated? Dolapo, to you first, and then.
And I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. So you were saying to mention. I think we get that out of the. Okay, I'll just go ahead, and I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So I think that we need to look. Power plants will not be built. Look at this, it's automatically in a day or in a year. There will have to be a process towards this, and it's the same process we are talking about with respect to how the bulk trader will be phased out. So I think that this will take a lot of planning, and there needs to be leadership at some point, which I think should still be NERC's role to take, which is, okay, how do we, there are obviously power plants at the federal level that are supplying power. Now, the fact that states, that they supply power to states, we know it's even insufficient anyway. We know that the demand for power is. So I don't see this as a loser's game. I actually see it as a winner's game, because what I expect to happen is that these, depending on their locations, should go to the states and try to offer the states something that works. Now, I know for a fact that we are also looking at bilateral trade between certain DISCOs and certain GENCOs now. So if we are looking at that, then I think that the risk of stranded power, except if we are looking at physical issues or technical issues, where maybe a plant is in a place where it is stranded to the point it can't get to willing customers, for example, then there may be a problem. But what I would say is, it's something that would engender competition. Obviously, generation companies who have been getting payments because there's an embed and a guarantee, would have to sit up, and look at their markets. And I think there are a few gens that are doing so. Look at their market, look at their customers, and see how, they can sell their power. Remember that power at that level is supposed to be cheaper, than what you do on the embedded, should engender competition. Key thing is this: there needs to be someone lead the process. How is this going to happen? How do we, how will the market then be restructured in the sense that GENCOs being able to sell to the states? The states have always had the opportunity to open up their doors to investors. This constitutional amendment didn't start that. They had the powers to generate. How many of them have plans? So I don't think there is that fear we should, put ourselves in a panic. I think that there's just a process that needs to be followed, and we need to.
Thank you, Dolapo. Delano, do you want to make your contributions on this, and then Fati?
Yes, absolutely. So can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so should any generation really be stranded? I think you said it all, Rahila, that where there's no proper planning, then you have the issues of stranded generation. And just as Dolapo also said, with the energy access gap that we have in Nigeria, then there should be no issue where generation is stranded. Now, there's also, of course, the issue of having an integrated resource plan, that somebody is overseeing and ensuring that end to end, with this integrated resource plan, even for the states sharing their own plans, with the federal providing leadership, then you'll be able to have a systematic process of ensuring that you don't result with stranded generation. And I'll speak to the stranded generation that is happening now and what is being done. So with the stranded generation that has been realized in the Nigerian electricity supply industry as we speak, there are investments there's this intervention between the transmission company of Nigeria and the distribution companies, the interface projects, and the idea is to improve the ability, one of the objectives is to improve the ability of the distribution companies to evacuate power, in the areas where they want more power, to be allocated to. So as far as I'm concerned, it's really an issue of planning. And for you to have proper planning, of course, there needs to be leadership. With the options provided by the regulations also include captive power, embedded generation, interconnected or isolated mini grid, and then traditionally sale to the grid. So with these options available, I don't think there will be an issue with stranded power as long as proper planning is done.
Patty, you share those views? Given that you are the middle person in ensuring that this power pass from upstream downstream. Looking at the investments and the current situation in the market, where you have SLAs and there are, issues with settling, between yourselves at TCN and the distribution companies in meeting their day-ahead nominations and operations like that. What do you share the same view? You are muted. We can't hear you. Patty, we can't hear you. Seems you're still muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I saw some Jumoke's and Dolapo's. They were coming in bits and pieces. I don't know if it's my connection.
I can hear you.
The option is, as a state, I honestly don't think states would invest. It's more not states per se, it's private people investing. In terms of evacuating power, I honestly don't believe there's actually stranded power at this moment, because for those that have stranded power, the generators that have excess power that's not been taken, it's more a function of that the power is not being paid for. That's why they want to go into bilaterals, and that's why we have the eligible customer for those that have excess power to give up. But the other option would be that TCN is not everywhere. The other option would be to do embedded generation for particular places. That would work very well for states. And the question of whether states, I don't know, apart from Lagos State, I don't think it's a matter of just one state. I think it's more of a couple of states coming together to form something than just a state, because there are very few states that are strong. In fact, there's no state as strong as Lagos State in terms of infrastructure, apart from Edo that has a lot more transmission lines. So in terms of stranded power, yes, embedded generation is an option. Secondly, is that, as Jumoke says, there's the SLA to deal with transmission and distribution interfaces. There's a lot of work to be done on both sides, to be honest with you. There's a lot of work to be done on the distribution networks as well, for them to be able to evacuate the power that's being willed. TCN also has to also strengthen the grid as well and upgrade certain lines as well. We have a lot of the issues with evacuation corridors and the resilience. That has to be addressed. But the thing I see is the bill recognizes that the ministry will sort of lead this. At this moment, I think NERC should start the conversation. I think they should, there has to be The way it is now, there are more questions than there are answers, and somebody has to start driving this conversation. Thank you.
Most certainly. I hear that. Dr. Joy, are you back? Okay, I don't think I saw she's back. Dr. Joy, are you there? Can you hear me? I think she's still having some connectivity issues. Dr. Ogaji, can you hear me? Okay, let's just go ahead. We're running out of time. I can see that a lot of people have posted questions on the Q&A, so I would like to start to take them, and I will, target different participants or panelists to answer the questions. Let me take the first one. I think it will come up on the screen. It's from Ruben Okoye. Ruben Okoye is asking a question. Won't states, it's on the screen, I'm sure you can see it, won't states' direct involvement in electrification not take us back to the NEPA scenario and undo the power sector privatization? Dolapo, what are your thoughts on this question?
I'm not sure what Mr. Kwe is saying, and maybe he's pointing to the capacity of the states. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what he's pointing to. And I think that this is where we are still looking to have a leader or a point person in directing this entire process. It's going to be a reiteration process. Obviously, standards need to be met. And on this doesn't portend to say that the state, the federal level abdicates its responsibility. Mm-hmm. Anybody who is in the business is first under the federal laws. That states cannot do this doesn't mean that federal laws don't exist to meet those standards. So if we are saying, okay, the fact that states can go into distribution, would that mean that we will be subjected to certain inefficiencies, for example? Then there needs to be some kind of standard setting in terms of what it is. And I think that is already on the federal level. So it will be great for the states to at least follow what's on the federal level and build on it. You understand? Now, there may now be issues around, who is going to go after the states if the state doesn't perform. Yes. You understand? Yes. That I cannot tell you. Yeah. So that would be my response.
When you think about it today, when you talk about state direct involvement in electrification, they are involved at off-grid because the concurrent list allows them to participate in that off-grid, and that is the essence of the Renewable Energy Rural Electrification Agency anyway, to work with every state in ensuring energy access and taking power to people that are not on the grid. So today, as it stands, the states are participating in rural in electrification process through the Rural Electrification Agency, and for those that have electricity state boards, that is part of what they are doing. So I don't think it will take us back. I think if things are well coordinated, managed, it should actually strengthen the power sector and provide more increased energy access to those that are off grid and have no access to energy. Patti, do you want to make your comments on the fact that somebody just posted? Let me say they talked about this is Ihoma. Sorry, apologies if I didn't call it properly. Ihoma in Wiwu. The position here is, what is the position? I'll put it up. What is the position of the electricity bill with respect to the constitutional amendment? To what extent will it be relevant when states begin to make its own electricity laws? I think this is to you, Dolapo. So the electricity bill, I think the question here is that, with respect to this constitutional amendment, what is the relevance if the electricity bill is passed? Do they align? Is there a misalignment? Does it strengthen I mean, the Constitution is above every other act. The participant is trying to understand that.
Okay, thanks, Ihoma, and thanks, Rahila. I think that there will be alignment. I think that whilst the bill was being reiterated, this constitutional bill came up. It wasn't then an act. Yeah. So you would see that in certain places. For example, the last slide before I went off, it says that even in transmission, states and federal can enter into PPPs with private operators. So it kind of envisaged that. And I think that there are other parts in the bill that envisage it. So what I had said when I was making the presentation was that we may even see more changes before it becomes an act. But at where the bill now is, I don't think that there will be conflict, but I envisage that we will have iterations or tests of what the act says. Hopefully people won't go to court, but some states may go to court, if they feel very strongly about it, that would then kind of hopefully bring us to an alignment of how things should work. But as the bill stands now, it's not in direct conflict. There may be more changes.
Sure. Okay, we'll see how that plays out. Countries including the United States, Australia, India, Canada, Brazil, and Mexico have separate states and federal regulatory organizations that perform different functions. In the States, Australia and India, for example, the federal regulatory agencies oversee the federal transmission system, while the state regulatory agencies control retail electricity distribution inside the individual states. There's a clear definition of roles in other countries where both federal and state regulators exist. For NESI, who will define those roles? Now, I would like Fatih, I would like your thoughts on this. When we looked at the second schedule on the concurrent list, it's clearly stated that the National Assembly can legislate with respect to generation and transmission. In that section, there is no reference to distribution. And when you go to the House of Assembly, in section 14 of the same section, it says that the state can legislate with respect to generation, transmission, and distribution. Now, in your view, do you think that transmission should solely be at the federal level and not have state involvement? What are your thoughts on this? Because right now, you are all lawyers on the panel. Right now, there seems to be a suggestion that the state, based on the provisions of this amendment and even the Constitution, the federal have no right to legislate on retail electricity distribution and transmission and generation should be at the federal level. What are your thoughts on these legally? What do you anticipate would happen? What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. So earlier on I said the only difference the amendment made was in terms of extending places to where the national grid is. The truth is that it's always been there that distribution is a matter for the states to handle. Somehow everybody missed it, and NERC is now regulating distribution, and we don't have state regulators. What happens is, as they say, if there's a lacuna, someone steps in. There's nobody, NERC takes over. If states now decide that they want to deal with the distribution, yes. And honest truth is that I see states buying transformers and reinforcing distribution lines. So why shouldn't they, if they're already doing this, they should find some legal way of being recognized. The truth is, it's not, I don't think states are really going to, very few states are going to be able to come into this arena at this moment. If I was a state governor in some states, I would wait for federal government to go and reinforce the transmission for me. Why would I invest if someone else is willing to do it, really? I mean, the cost is so high. For those clamoring to do these laws now, is that because they already have infrastructure put in by the federal government. They're not talking about putting in new transmission infrastructures, because if you look at the states that are now saying this, most of them already have a certain degree of investment in their states in terms of transmission. So for those states that do not have that degree of infrastructure in terms of transmission, I'll just wait for government to come. Or if, of course, I can afford, I will license private investors. But the truth is, private investors want to come to certain states because the rate of return might not be so appealing.
Of course. Delano, 1 minute on this, and we'll move on to another participant's question.
Okay, for me, I think it's really, there's a need for clarity, and any laws that will be enacted going forward must make it clear so that there is no confusion. On the issue of distribution, of course, it's clear based on what the constitutional amendment says. But what about the states that, choose not to, even activate this, as Fatima has said? What happens? So there's a possibility that they are still going to be controlled under the federal regulator. So there is need for a lot of clarity going forward in the enactments that will emerge from the National Assembly and State House of Assembly.
I mean, on the screen, we can see here from Wola Joseph. She's saying that she does not think that the constitutional amendment envisages the state going into generation, transmission, and distribution. She believes that the idea is for them to create an enabling environment to come into their states and invest in their areas. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, probably a pocket lawyer, but what I read seems to suggest that states can actually legislate and they can actually participate in this. So is there like a difference? Is the amendment saying that they can only legislate and they can't, build? I mean, you have states building generation plans. So I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so I would like to say that you may have a right to do something, but that doesn't mean you have to do it yourself. So I think that is the idea that is being explained, that once you have a right, are you best suited, to carry out the assignment yourself? Or will it be better for you to engage a more capable partner to carry out that assignment? And I think that's why the speaker, Wola, is alluding to the fact that if you are not best placed, then bring in competent people, to do it. Because what is the eventual objective and end goal? Is it economic development? Is it energy access? Then if the state, and I think that was what Mr. Okoye was also alluding to, that by the time states start running distribution companies, are they able to do it better than the private sector? So why not create an environment that allows people to come and invest and do what they know to do best, rather than the state doing it itself?
Makes perfect sense. Dean, there's a comment from Dean Solebo, and he's asking, do new generating companies need to get approvals from both state regulators and NERC for new projects? Or it's saying here, let me see if it's complete. Says, do new generating companies need to get approvals for both state regulators and NERC for new projects, or will one approval or the other be enough to operate? And it's interesting that Dean asked that question, because it was one of my questions here where I talked about if state regulators license other distribution utilities in addition to the 13 that we have today, 11, and then we have ABA and IBOM that recently joined, because this would imply that the current discos may lose some of their customers within the franchise area, which will reduce their energy offtake. Now, what is the potential impact of this scenario on existing PPAs? And the second part was, would current GENCOs require state operating licenses in addition to the generation licenses from NERC? I mean, I think, Dolako, the second part of that question, I'd like you to make comment on it. And Delano, what you think about this issue of states, giving licenses to new distribution companies who obviously are going to compete with your customers, reduce your pie, as it were, and obviously that would have impact on your revenue. Do you see that playing out, and how would it work out?
Okay, so good question, because the constitutional amendment gives the states the right to, but have they done it? So laws, a state that does not have a law, does not have an enabling framework or environment, where does that requirement for a license come from? So the state needs to create its policy, needs to enact its laws, create its agencies, and then process, evolves in that format. So that's what's happening. And then you cannot apply a law, retrospectively. So whatever law is enacted going forward. It's not enacted, to affect those that were already in existence and in operation before the law took effect. Thanks, Rahila.
I see. Thank you. Dolapo, your thoughts? Dolapo?
So I think that democracy is create panic because I have particular states and this constitution might state and law, and this period from when was made up.
Sorry, Dolapo, your connection is, you're a bit patchy. We can't hear you very well. It's a bit patchy. Hello, can you hear me, Dolapo?
Just checking that I'm stuck.
Dolapo?
Can you?
Yes. Dolapo, I think you are frozen. If we will, we'll come back to you. Patty, in terms of this, and on the chat, unfortunately, Dr. Joy Gaji couldn't join us because of her connection, but she did make a comment, which I feel is aligned with what Fatty said earlier. She said, and I read, that only a few states like Lagos, Akwa Ibom, only a few states like Lagos, Akwa Ibom, Edo might be able to participate in all aspects of the value chain. Because of the capital-intensive nature of such projects, they will still need to collaborate with existing providers to serve their states. I believe that, Patty, this is the point you're raising earlier about, states using existing infrastructure and not, trying to build parallel lines that will cost a fortune. And obviously, people need to also understand that whatever capital is put out there is passed through to you and I as customers, and it pushes electricity tariffs through the roof. So I think she's in alignment with what Patia said earlier about the fact that these projects are capital intensive, and it might be better to use existing infrastructure and collaborate with existing players to see how they can facilitate a better environment for operation. She also said that while it is okay to carry out the review of EPTRA, there are burning questions. One of such questions is, have we established a reasonable basis for the amendment? I think this can take into a legal battle, but we will hang on to that. Up on the screen, what I have put up as subsector challenges, and I would like Fatih to go first. The question here is, what are the chances that this new legal landscape will help resolve the sector challenges? How do you see state governments responding to this new law in this regard? What would be your expectation as a transmission company of Nigeria for the state to improve the current situation? So how do you see, what would you expect the state to do in working with you as a transmission company of Nigeria to address some of these challenges that is up on the screen? I'm sure there are more, and perhaps some of it have been reduced. For example, the lack of student reserve has been an ongoing debate and discussion that is required to boost the group and it hasn't happened, is there any role for the state to assist with this, to further strengthen and to stop the confusion company, the grid from collapsing in the fashion that we have seen in recent past? Patty?
Okay, hi. And thanks, Rahila. Let me just quickly go through them. Lack of spinning reserves, I don't think the states have anything to do with that. It's a matter of generation function and the fact that there's a procurement process and it has to be bidded and NERC has to superintend and agree on the cost of spinning reserves. So that's where we are now, is the procurement process and securing the spinning reserves. The interface is being handled by the SLA, as Jumoke has spoken about it. What can the states do about it? Really, I don't think they also have a role. Inadequate transmission capacity and stability, well, unless they have money to invest in transmission lines, I don't know. I don't see that happening. To post system dispatch, that also has risen to a lot of arguments. It's because TCN is one. The new bill, of course, envisages that, and it's always been there in the EPSR Act as well, the separation between the transmission and the dispatch function. Lack of integrated resource planning. That also, the new bill is actually working, well, but it states that there will be national integrated electricity policy and strategic implementation plan by the players in the sector that will be reviewed every 5 years or as the need arises when the minister recognizes that. It will be wonderful if, we're good at making plans. Implementation is our problem. And when the players change in the key roles, they sort of tend to come with their own ideas. So it'd be nice to see if there's a plan that's going to be followed through. It says, that is where we need the states really. The right-of-way issues, because land belongs to the states. They're the ones that can take people away from the right-of-way. But of course, there's also that political will. I recall in a particular year we went, yes, the power that was going through, we really needed to reconductor, and they needed to clear people under the lines, but it was an election year, and the governor didn't want to lose a second term. So, there are other things that feed into this sort of things. Vandalization, that is another problem for us as well. And I'm happy to see that the new bill sets up a fast track, like a task force, because there are cases where we get vandals, and because, of course, it's a criminal offense, we cannot prosecute. We have to depend on the public prosecutor and the police to prosecute our matters for us. So there's a lot of challenges. So yes, there's also local enforcement. The states can actually have like sort of vigilante, communities have to be sensitized. The government can sensitize communities on the effects of the vandalization. So yes, for right-of-way and vandalization, I see what states can do. Poor connection to distribution assets being handled by the SLA, hopefully. Lack of SCADA. Yeah, that has been elusive, but work is underway, and I believe, of course, that if really you hive off the SO part from the transmission, really the real function for the ISO to be fully functional, not even fully, I mean minimally functional, they need a SCADA. So that's all. Even though TCN has an innovative way, they've done some IoT things, Internet of Things, to see part of the grid. But yes, SCADA is a must, and it's being worked on. So for states, I see that it's the right of way and the vandalization.
Excellent. I mean, you mentioned ISO, the Independent System Operator, which will be carved out of TCN eventually, leaving just the wires and assets in TCN. Do you envisage then that with this amendment, constitutional amendment, we would have, for example, 10 ISOs? Would that create a better structure for the decentralization that has occurred by this amendment? Do you think that is something? I mean, the electricity bill does not say that, but given this change, would it make it more effective to have regions or ISOs in different regions working to ensure that there's open access for power developers in those areas to use the grid? Would that make it more efficient?
Efficiency, sure, but Lagos has thought about it. In their policy, they've actually thought of doing their own SO to dispatch within Lagos. There will still remain a national dispatch because there will be power. If you're going into bilaterals, there will be power bought from other places, from other states, and there will be exported excess power to other places. So the national ISO will still be there, yes. Within states, yes. If states actually do invest in generation, they will need their own local dispatch as well. As we said, there's a lot more questions than answers, and there's a lot of funding needed for all this. So how far this can go, your guess is as good as mine, honestly.
Certainly, most certainly. Jumoke, 1 minute on distribution. You don't have to take every point. I mean, I guess there are key ones there. We feel that perhaps the states can collaborate and support distribution end of the business.
So what I'll do is just run through what I think the states can do, and not really address issues because the issues are clear. And so if by the time this takes off, the issue of tariffs is always a big discussion, and lack of interference and ensuring that the tariff is really cost reflective. I think that is important in creating any electricity market. The other issue is overregulation. So for any investor that is coming in, they want to ensure that, the lines are clear. Who is regulating me? And what are my obligations to that regulator? So it's not a case of, now we have this opportunity. Rent seeking is the order of the day. And, you try to just tax, needlessly. We've seen that in the distribution company where some states create a tax for you in particular. When you look at the description of that tax, you know that you are the only entity in that state that fits the tax. So you don't want rent seeking because that will make it difficult for investors, to come in. Of course, avoidance of waste and parallel structures. No need to reinvent the wheel. If we build on existing structures, work with the existing market participants, create a framework that allows investments to come in. Respect sanctity of contracts. Some areas may have been franchised, investments have gone into some places. There's a lot of room to play, in terms of addressing the electrification issues, within Nigeria and in the different states. So you don't have to go revoking, things that already exist and a contract that have already, come into place. And of course, the important thing is over bloated projects. When the states start to play in the electricity market, are those costs, are they efficient costs? Are they prudent costs? Are they, competitively sourced? Because everything will eventually end up in the tariff. So if you don't want a bloated tariff at the end of the day, then you must, from the get-go, begin to ensure that those projects that have been invested in are prudent and there are no overruns, and things like that. Of course, states should pay their debt, even for their electricity consumption. So it will be good for them to also develop a culture of wanting to pay and continuously pay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delano. Dolapo, do you want to just give us your thoughts in terms of how you feel the states can help with some of these challenges that has plagued our sector for some time now and is still on? Please, 1 minute, and then we'll take some questions from participants and wrap up.
Thanks, Rahila. I'm not quite sure what happened at the last time when I was responding to the question, but just to finish up that question, to say that
go ahead.
To Dean, that the states haven't enacted laws yet. So from a generation perspective, you are still subject to federal. Even if states enact their laws, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to take away what is on the federal level. However, we may get to a stage where, there will have to be dichotomies. There will have to be dichotomies. Who is regulating what? But we haven't gotten there yet. You are still regulated by federal. Okay, so going to the slide, I would start with distribution because I think that states have a role, and I think it was mentioned here about the fact that states could invest in I think was talking about distribution. A lot of us know that states already have investments in distribution in a way. There are a number of states where it's actual state governments that build some of the distribution infrastructure. And I recall that during the privatization, there is actually a plan for states to take up shares in the distribution companies. So I think what we're talking about was states being able to acquire the discos, given that, some of the discos are in financial issues. So that's one. And we probably will see that states having a role in distribution, even in the distribution companies. And that can be an organic way to deal with, would I say, cohabit within states and within their regulation. That's one. But this distribution slide now, if you places where one is in country, I have personally been involved in states kind of being involved in to help driving or even the schools. For example, every house having a meter is something that the state should be able to regulate, and that would help revenue assurance. Collection inefficiencies as well. The metering should hopefully help, with even collection inefficiencies. And inefficiencies, I also refer, stealing, power theft. And I think in that perspective, which is a bit trickier. The general challenge, they're not things that can help with at state level. However, things like gas constraints, for example, honestly, for a state, except if a state is gas rich, that's the only way. If a state is gas rich and has access to that, states like River State, for example, River State is very gas rich, so that may be something in which on that, that in their state. And for and dispatches is again within the states, and it depends on the state. For things like the pocket and capacity, one of the things that this whole thing is going to throw up is capacity. Even in the general, we say that we have full capacity, people who have the depth of knowledge. I think that we have a very rich depth of knowledge for a country, but it's going to even open up more opportunities. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dolapo. Unfortunately, I wish Joy was on this call. She's still, it's unfortunate that we are not able to have her fully here to speak on generation, as it were.
She just sent you messages.
What did she say? I can't see her, unfortunately. So I think the question from me, and I can see one of the participants asking the same question, is what we have on the screen. So discos assert, and of course, Delano, this is for you. It says that discos assert an exclusive right to their franchise area, and since privatization, they have continued to make capital expenditures there as required to meet the key performance indicators set by the regulator. How will the state participation impact discos operation and revenue requirements, revenue recovery? Before us here, some of the terms in the distribution license that could imply that there's some exclusive right. Some have argued that there's no exclusive right by the discos. So, what are your thoughts on this? And of course, just to add to this, because there's a similar question by participants, the person saying, with these amendments, who owns the customers in each disco coverage area? How may these affect the willingness of states to invest or partner with others in power infrastructure development?
Okay, so of exclusivity has been widely debated, on whether discos have an exclusive right to their franchise or coverage areas. And, if you look through the agreements, while no specific clause, points to exclusivity, but you can see that the expectations, the KPIs, the investments, as mentioned, the investments that were made by the investors was in respect of the whole coverage area, not just the parts. And the key performance indicators that were set, reporting requirements that were imposed on the distribution companies are for the coverage area. So whilst it will not have been explicitly stated, there is a legitimate expectation where investments are expected to report, to comply for the whole coverage area. So how will state participation impact those operations? I would think I've said that before. It is important to collaborate so that the whole sector is not thrown into disputes and litigation and lawsuits, because there is enough opportunity for all players to be able to realize the end goal of having a viable and thriving electricity market that can, potentially impact economic development and drive, the nation as a whole, forward. That's the way I see it. Thank you.
Makes perfect sense. I think this is 9 minutes past 12. I know we started late, I think I would like each panelist to give 1 minute talk on this whole amendment to the Constitution. If you were, by May 29th, we'll have swearing of the new administration. And I was wondering that if you had the opportunity to stand, before, whoever, would take charge of power development with respect to this change, what would be your advice or your thoughts to that person in government as we transition to a new administration? Dolapo, let's start with you.
I think it's very important that if I was to advise the incoming administration, I would say enable NERC to be able to lead on this process. We will still get to the point regulating. I also say that what I would also, because you invest,
we can't. Unfortunately,
that message to go from to the federal level and the state level, we need to be pruned. The state needs to down. I don't know, but I've
you're a bit patchy, Dolapo. It's a bit patchy. We can barely hear you, Dolapo. But thank you. I'll go to the next panelist. Fatih, do you have any parting comments for participants and perhaps the new administration? If you had the opportunity to be called to advise on this, what would be your parting or your advice?
My advice is that there has to be very strong political will in taking through the plan, and there has to be a plan actually. NERC will have to take their rightful position, and whoever becomes the minister should be able to drive the sector to achieving whatever it is that is agreed. So the new government has a lot on their hands, and they need very serious people working on it, and there should not be any policy somersaults.
I think Rahila is here.
Jumoke, do you want to go ahead? Looks like Rahila went off.
Okay, so for me, I think building on what Fatima said and what you've said, Dolapo, I would say collaborate. It's important, and there is no need to reinvent the wheel. The essence is to assess where we are, and what has worked and what has not worked. And let's build, based on our assessments of what has worked and what has not worked. So there is need for collaboration, or at the National Assembly on the new law that is coming out. There's a need for collaboration at federal and state level on the electricity laws that will emerge from the states. And of course, there's need for collaboration between states and the existing licensees. It's important. Thank you. We can't hear you, Rahila.
We can't hear you, Rahila.
Apologies, I didn't know I was muted. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists and attendees for joining us today. for this very important discussion on state participation in the Nigerian power sector. Obviously, we have gained valuable insights into the new powers granted to the states from our panelists as a result of the constitutional amendment, which enables them to operate in areas covered by the national grid. As we have seen, this constitutional amendment has the potential to bring about significant changes to the power sector, with states now able to take a more active role in ensuring reliable and efficient electricity supply to their citizens. No doubt, based on the conversation and the contributions we've had today from our panelists, that collaboration and coordination will be key to achieving the desired outcomes of improved electricity access and increased investment in the sector. We certainly look forward to seeing the positive impact of state participation in the power sector in the years to come. We hope that this webinar has been informative and has provided you with the knowledge and understanding necessary to navigate the evolving legal landscape. Thank you once again, distinguished panelists. I'm honored to have moderated this session, and I believe that the audience are more informed. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to continue the conversation in the nearest future. Thank you very much, and have a very good day, panelists, as you go to your different offices. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.